Started. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this new session, this new series of webinars for this year under the RECOS project with different partners that will allow us to get together with partners being very active within the Indian Ocean Commission who work in a very dynamic way in terms of managing costs on island in this geographic area. And this project is supported by the French Development um, Agency and including our partners who are part of this project for exchange of competencies on coastal observation. So we are in a series of 4 sessions of webinars. The first one was held last week. And I would like to thank those who listened to us. And today we have 3 new speakers with a lot of diversity in terms of testimonies. Last week we were in a format of roundtable, and today among the 3 testimonies, the 3 experts who work directly on setting up and anime facilitation of observatories, especially for this session on coastal erosion and climate change impacts, in fact. So, as usual, for the logistic issue on the platform, the participants, you'll have the floor. We are happy to give you the floor today, Anne and Victor, who will collect your question today. So feel free to write your questions in the Q&R chat box of this webinar, and our 2 colleagues will note them down, and Anne will also collect them all and ask them during the question and answer session. There is also an interpretation services. We have the opportunity to have Bellarmine interpreting in the 2 directions from English into French and then vice versa. And that's why I'm speaking a little bit slower, because for him to be able to interpret me into these languages. And I would like to thank the speakers to switch off your cameras and microphone when you're not speaking. And as you all know, we are under the ICO Solutions initiative launched by the Marseille Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and then also the Littoral Conservatoire, which is a French public institution. And since then, we have been facilitating different dynamics on the management of coast and islands. I would like to apologize today because I'm coughing a lot, so I'm sorry for the interruption. In fact, the idea is to find some solution to exchange experience for everyone to get rich information, to benefits, and also to learn from errors as well from different observatories in different corners of the planet. So the Conservatoire du Littoral is a French public institution who acquire parcels on coastline in order to turn them into restored and developed and welcome sites, who get more than 14% of the owners, whether in the mainland France or in the overseas territory. Now I would like to give the floor to Anne to introduce the RECOS project and the major challenges as well within the IOC. And good morning, everyone. Thank you, Fabrice, for giving the floor. Welcome to this webinar. We are very happy on behalf of IOC's RECOS project to organize this webinar on the observatory thematics, which is an area where there are a lot of needs. So we, RECOS, is co-founded by French development agencies and the French Global Environment Facility and IOC, which manages it, which is an intergovernmental organization which covers 5 member states in the Indian Ocean area, including Madagascar, Comoros, Seychelles, Mauritius, and La Réunion as part of France. And this organization implements several projects in terms of cooperation, in reinforcing regional cooperation on different thematic areas and sectors in ecosystem preservation, sustainable management of natural resources, and we also work more specifically on these areas to enhance population resilience and coastal ecosystems against climate change. So if you have any further information or if you have any question, please feel free to use the chat box. Thank you very much, Anne, for this information and presentation of RECORS and IOC. So last week we presented the first session among the 4 sessions, which were in general how to set up, facilitate, and sustain an observatory, a coastal observatory, and then with our RECOS colleague, we try to specialize on 3 focus. So for today, it's about coastal erosion and climate change. And the second one for next week will be on biodiversity and coastal ecosystems. And then finally on coastal socioeconomic dynamics. So quickly, this is what I presented. My name is Fabrice Bernard, the moderator from the European International Head Officer of Conservatoire du Littoral. We also have Victor, who is part of EU international delegation organizing this webinar, who will we'll have Anne as well, who will be in charge of the chat box. We'd like to thank Bellarmine as well, who is interpreting behind the webinar for today, as I told you earlier, in the 2 directions of language. Now we are going to have a general introduction for us to better understand the problematics of coastal erosion phenomenon with Nordine Marine for 10 minutes, who should be joining us within a few seconds once the technical issues are settled. And then we'll have a case study which will be interesting from the La Réunion Island Observatory, which will be presented by Rémi Bellon, where we will also have a question and answer session. As I told you, please feel free to drop your question on the chat box on the territories with regard to coastal erosion, and then another case study from Wales, which will be presented by Emerald Siguri on the monitoring of coastal observatory in the southwest of the UK. And then we will have another question and answer session as well. And then finally, we will close this session for this time. So as you said, we have 4 guest speakers. We have, first of all, Nordine Mirani from Comoros, from the DDEM, who is going to introduce himself later on, especially on the Coastal Observation Observatory in Comoros, with the experience of the DDEM project from Comoros, and then Rémi Bellon, who is the La Réunion Island Observatory, and then Emerald Siguri on the Southwest Coastal Monitoring as well later on. So now let me give the floor right away to Rémi Bellon. Please introduce yourself with a few words and then continue with your presentation as well on the La Réunion Observatory. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rémi Bellon. I've been working on BRGM since 2010 on coastal risk. I have been in La Réunion since 2017, where some initiatives and action have been implemented to address the issue of erosion phenomenon and process in La Réunion, but also in the Indian Ocean in general. Thank you, Rémi, for this short presentation. Now I'll give the floor to Emerald Siguri.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. My name's Emerald Sigri. I'm the Coastal Process Team Leader at Southwest Coastal Monitoring, which is part of a network monitoring the coast in the southwest of England. I've been the Coastal Process Team Leader there since its inception, so I'm looking forward to presenting to you this afternoon.
Merci beaucoup aussi pour cette présentation très
Thank
directe.
you very much for the presentation as well. And as I told you, we have a small connection issue with Nordin, so we are going to skip and move right away to Nordin's, to Remy's presentation, and then we come back to Nordin's presentation when he's connected to the platform. So now I will give the floor right away to Remy Bellon for you to see the case study of the La Réunion Island on coastal erosion phenomenon of this observatory known as Nuba de Mer. So I'm going to present the way how La Réunion Island organized to better integrate the erosion, coastal erosion problems in the coastal development project in La Réunion. So there are so many actions on La Réunion Island, which consist in observing, monitoring the phenomenon around the island. And we see that La Réunion is an Indian Ocean island, which is at the same time has different types of coast with sand or rocky or different types of coast with a lot of reefs. And this shows the diversity of that are possible on the exposure and vulnerability of a coast. So this erosion problem, and we have a rather high demographic density, so we will integrate this problem in the management and development of coasts. So as I told you earlier, there are so many monitoring and observation actions and phenomenon that have been initiated since in the year 1990s by university actors, and we are also monitoring them managed by BLGM on the whole island to have a vision that is rather exhaustive on how the coast could progress and evaluate and evolve in the different coasts of the island. And we understood that this knowledge was mastered and controlled by a scientist expert, but less known by the world and the territory actors in general. So we realized that there was an interest in trying to concentrate all of these activities in an observatory. That's why we started it in 2020, and we created the observatory in 2024 and gathered a number of actors. The main one of them is the government, who will be the facilitator of this observatory and the main funder. We also have BRGM, the University of La Réunion, through the CNRS, its line ministry, and then also from its history in the past and its experience on the platform of vulnerability that they could set up on the territory, and also the French Weather Forecast Office as well, with their competence on the territory. So the objective, the first objective is to try to coordinate every existing initiative on the territory. There is now an interaction within the different actors, whether scientific, institutional, or other type of actors, to maintain communication and information dissemination. So the observatory is organized on three main areas of intervention for one objective. At the same time, to sustain the observation, the monitoring, whether on the physical aspect, but also on other ecological aspect of the milieu in terms of biodiversity, on coral reef, but also with a lot of social science notions and aspect, with risk perception on the population and the setting up of procedure or development actions by the collectivity. And of course, without forgetting the climate change aspect. The second objective is to value the data and make them available, accessible, and readable by creating a website that will allow to refer to all the data to disseminate the information that they can be accessible for all. And then the last objective is to make the territory benefit from a local expertise on this coastal problematic to better develop land, but also with regard to this problem and to better make a better decision, we need to know this information. Next slide. So there are different types of measures being implemented. There are a lot of acquisition awareness on the characteristics, some topographic campaign. There are a lot of pressure as well. The idea is to observe, to monitor together the whole characteristics that may influence the littoral, the coastal dynamics. Next, please. And also think of a new way of valuing those information. We work on different type of indicators, different method of valuing those data. Sometimes they pass through very simple actions because sometimes by creating them, there might be an erosion following an event. So, along the beach, we work on the sediment toll as well. The objective is to easily visualize this information on data available. Next, please. We work on different data as well. The idea is to make the actors have access to different type of information to have those data available on the process that we will control on each sectors and to follow the sediment toll as well. And the idea is to make this information available on a format that is the easiest to be disseminated and understood. And we work as well on the creation of a bibliographic database. The idea is to have access to bibliographical data easily on the territory. Next. This is an example. The idea is to gather a series of documents for a given municipality to have a vision of what can exist that will help inform in a development project of this given territory. And now we try to expand this project to other aspects, so not to work on the hazards at coastal level, but also with a whole number of indicators that I raised earlier, both the stakes, the challenges along the coast, the type of development that are being implemented, and the management as well on the different coastlines. The objective is to monitor all of these indicators along the time to have a vision on the vulnerability of each portion of coastline along the time, depending on the different criteria, different indicators, whether they are physical or the milieu or the type of development or actions that could be implemented. So the second objective is to have a visualization and access to the data to disseminate them. Then a website has been created that will allow to access to this knowledge along the coastline. It is a website launched last week. It is very recent because the framework convention was signed in 2024 this year, and this website has as an objective is to disseminate different kind of news and information on coastal problems. And we also work on training with a university diploma existing for technical representative of local authorities. So the idea is to create a link between the different actors of a territory and also to convey some messages on the problematic of managing the coastlines. And the third objective is to allow the access to this expertise to local authorities, and it needs to require technical meetings, the drafting of specifications, or data dissemination, participation in development projects to facilitate, to help and improve, taking into account of a phenomenon and to avoid to reproduce and committing the same errors committed in the past, knowing that now we begin to have a vision that is more interesting about what is happening on the La Réunion coast, and we have been solicited for a few projects or development project ongoing on the coast of La Réunion. So I think that's all for me. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Remy. We always try to connect to our friend Nourdine to see whether he's ready or not. I have some questions to ask on the La Réunion Observatory. So at least we can make sure that the collect and securization of data is ensured for a long term, because the idea, because of different projects and different initiatives, this means that we can make sure that this coastal observatory is on the right track, on long term. Well, the main actors now is the government, and because we have integrated national strategy for managing, and we have a financing fund resources. So the government will be the facilitator of this thematic and has the willingness to integrate this phenomenon in the territory development. So for the moment, the government is our main funder and actor, and that's why we have a dynamic that will allow us to sustain this project. Thank you very much. Two other questions related to this. Who are the main users, or are they the government or the local authorities to better calculate in terms of development, and does the fact to propose some analysis that will allow the government or the local authorities to make a decision to focus on the observatory, or as you initiated this approach? Well, for me, the monitoring that will allow this monitoring system, it shows the interest in having this type of monitoring center. We have data and knowledge that have been existing that will allow us to conduct some number of expertise on a punctual problem on the territory following extreme events. So we see that the observation and the long-term observation and the key to better manage the territory and the coastline. So now these data are rather for the local authorities, because they are the ones who have a key in territory development. So the idea is that they can use this local expertise to better develop the territory. And the observatory itself is not the only data provider, but the idea is to have the exchange and to also securize the data, to have a data center or a study center at the territory level for this case. Thank you very much. I'm going to give the floor to Anne now to continue with the questions on the chat. Yes, thank you, Fabrice. We have a few questions from the chat box. So, Remy, someone would like to know whether this work involved the whole coastline of La Réunion Island. And I think the most relevant question is, what are the main difficulties encountered in this project at this stage for the moment? Or some people who would like to set up an observatory, so would like to understand the main difficulties encountered. Well, I would say that to come back to the coastline. It's not the whole coastline around the La Réunion Island. It is very complicated to monitor all the coastline, with all the events that may occur. And depending on the challenges, the stakes and dynamics we are monitoring, that's the first point. The second question, of course, we need to have the willingness to work together. Now the observatory is working because of all actors, whether institutional or scientific actors, have this willingness to have this implement a partnership to better integrate those coastal problematic in developing the territory and the coasts. Thank you, Remy. Maybe there will be other questions on the chat. I will let you see them later on if you'd like to answer them. Maybe one last question about the funding. We know that these are research institutions who participate in data collection and information as well in frequency of data collection on how often you collect them. Is it easy to ensure a continuity on the financing? I'm thinking of the labs working on monitoring and ecology. So, is there any homogeneity in terms of funding among all the data collectors? Or there might be some gaps or some problems as well that may also encountered for continued follow-up. Well, there might be some gaps. It's not always obvious to ensure the monitoring and data setup because the project setup, because we have this name as a coastal observatory. So, setting up the project and the monitoring at the same time, there might be some gaps as well on some data. But once again, it's a a matter of willingness to work together that will allow us to bring answers to the problems of a territory. And once we have institutional funding, then it will work. Thank you very much. Other questions that are the machine observatory itself, in terms of governance, is there a scientific committee or a ad hoc steering committee or any other management entity? And is there also a secretariat and employees as well working for the observatory? That's the question. Well, we are the observatory is a label. There is a framework agreement that will allow for each partners to participate in the observatory, in which we will say that some studies, some data that might have been conducted elsewhere, but it's a matter of, it's rather a commitment of institution to work together and share the information, to communicate them, and then
ou principalement, on va dire, entre l'État et
a commitment to apply all these among partners, mainly between the government and the scientific partners, to work on different aspects, different issues, depending on everyone's expertise. So there is a steering committee being held annually, and we also have a technical committee among the different partners, where the partners are not directly involved because the topic is not common to everyone, but we meet twice a year at least to discuss about the whole project, the needs on the territory, to make the project progress. So does this steering committee choose a specific topic as their local people elected, or only the research labs? How do you do to choose a new thematic for the territory on which you work? Well, it's very recent because it has just been signed, so this one is not yet perfectly organized, but for the moment it is more of the technical operators, the government and the region who gather around the table, and then there are discussions with local authorities, at least to disseminate the existence of this observatory. And then we want to work with the local authorities, and there are projects that can be also implemented depending on the need that will also sent to the observatory by the local authorities. Another question I also received is this observatory wholly dedicated to climate change impacts on erosion or any other thematics such as biodiversity or marine resources? Yes, for the moment it's mainly on erosion and due to existing partnership for a long time, but the idea is to expand them on other thematic, on the conditions of the reef, biodiversity, to have a more exhaustive view of the problematic at the coast in general. One last question. In fact, Nordin, we can't have a connection with Nordin, so we take advantage of asking you a lot of questions here. So, do you buy data, or do you only sign agreement to make data available for free of charge? Is there any economic model to sell or buy data or to have them available? Mainly, we don't buy data, but there might be some subcontracting operation talking about purchasing data, but we may also buy services for us to get the data, but not purchasing the data as they are. So the idea is to disseminate them as easiest as possible in development project conducted by the local authorities. So they take directly the data relating to their sectors and the report associated to these to have a vision on the knowledge of this sector. The idea is for them, for the data to be accessible for everyone. Thank you very much, Remy. We will meet you again later on at the end with a question and answer session. Because we have already addressed a lot of topics. Unfortunately, we cannot connect to Nordin up to now. So let's move on right away and give the floor to Emerald. Please, the floor is yours to continue this presentation.
Je vous laisse présenter et on
I will ask you to introduce yourself, and then please continue with the presentation followed by the question and answer session.
Thank you very much. Yes, as I said, my name is Emerald Sigri, and I'm the Coastal Process Team Leader at the Southwest Regional Coastal Monitoring Programme, or Southwest Coastal Monitoring as we are now known. So this afternoon, I'm just going to introduce you to our programme. We have been collecting, collating and reporting on a variety of coastal monitoring data since 2006, building one of the most comprehensive coastal data sets in the world, along our roughly 2,500 kilometres of the English coastline. We are part of a national network of regional coastal monitoring programmes that cover the entirety of the coast of England and Wales. And as a network, our aim is to work together to provide a standard, repeatable, long-term and cost-effective method of monitoring the coastal environment. And we're very, very lucky to be in a position where we are government grant and aid funded in 6 yearly cycles. Next slide, please. So Southwest Coastal Monitoring are the largest of the network of coastal monitoring programmes, and we're a partnership between the maritime local authorities of the southwest of England, our coastal groups and our Environment Agency in the UK. We have a coastline that encompasses many challenges, especially in relation to climate change. So in the southwest, we have soft cliffs, sandy beaches, gravel barriers, mudflats, dunes, designations too numerous to list, also a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, and an estuary which boasts one of the largest tidal ranges in the world. So many challenges to be addressed, many different types of coastal monitoring needed. Indeed, our peninsula has been described as the breakwater for the rest of the UK. So you can well appreciate that it is something that needs to be monitored consistently, especially when we're confronted with climate change and increased erosion. So before the advent of Southwest coastal monitoring, the approach to data collection and archiving in the Southwest had been very ad hoc, with very little consistency in data collection or analysis. Data would be collected on a scheme-by-scheme basis over the short term to varying specifications, and then it will be archived, likely to be lost at the back of a filing cabinet somewhere, or potentially to be passed on somewhat and then kind of evaporate as the knowledge behind it and the scheme itself came to an end. Nobody was collaborating or sharing, and very few long-term data sets existed. So this led to a duplication of effort, lack of continuity, and wasting of funds. Southwest Coastal Monitoring has remedied this by collecting a baseline evidence base and building on that consistently year by year over the past 18 years. All the data that we collect is to a high quality standard specification. It's quality checked by my team of dedicated coastal process scientists and is then made freely available to anybody with an interest in the coast via our website. So why do we monitor? Why do we need to monitor? Well, this is a long-term evidence base and it is so important. In the UK, 520,000 properties are currently at risk from coastal flooding. Around 9,000 properties are at risk from coastal erosion, and around £260 million of damage can occur annually. With climate change projections, this is predicted to rise to 105 million properties at risk from coastal flooding, 100,000 from coastal erosion, and damages could rise to £1 billion annually. In the Southwest, we also rely heavily on our coast for tourism, which is our main industry. So the UK Environment Agency have a flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy, and that aims for a nation that is ready for and resilient to flooding and coastal change, today, tomorrow, and to the year 2100. And we can't achieve that without first understanding how our coastline looks today, how it's changing, and how it's responded to various forcing. Hence the increasing need for our long-term evidence base. As each site around the coast is different, our monitoring regime uses a risk-based approach to determine how we monitor each site and the level of monitoring that that site is subject to. And you can see a little example of our risk-based approach here on the screen. Next slide, please. Our core monitoring is based around 7 key data types, which are topographic beach surveys, LiDAR, aerial photography, habitat mapping, coastal asset surveys, bathymetric surveys, and our hydrodynamics network, which includes nearshore wave buoys, tide gauges, and meteorological stations, which are all broadcasting in near real time from all around the southwest coast. All of that data is collected over low tide on a spring tide to maximise capture of the intertidal area. And we also have a post-storm response built into our survey regime to be reliable and, very importantly, politically neutral foundation to inform coastal management decisions. The data has informed shoreline management plan, which set out a planned approach to managing flood and coastal erosion risk around the coastline of England to 21 management areas, which help to manage national coastal erosion risk mapping, modelling, beach and dune management plans, instant response and recovery. It also feeds into academic research. The possibilities for such a data set are possibly endless. It is all available to download, as I said, from our website, along with all of our reports and analysis. Our hydrodynamics network, again, is broadcasting there in near real time. So that is, in an instant response situation, incredibly valuable and helps our local authorities to manage in real time their flood and coastal defences. We are currently putting together as well the finishing touches to an interactive dashboard, which will allow users to interrogate our data themselves. So it will bring our data to them in a way that they can get the most out of it as quickly as possible so that they can respond to their own coasts. Next slide, please. We also have a community engagement component to our programme. Community engagement and education is incredibly important when we're facing the impacts of climate change and the changes that come with climate change along our coast. So we are I guess kind of the UK hub for CoastSnap, which is a global citizen science initiative, and that uses fixed point photography to capture the changing coastlines. It allows communities to really take ownership of their beach and understand how it changes on a daily basis. And we've currently got 26 active CoastSnap sites, which again feed into our website. Next slide, please. Over almost 2 decades of monitoring, we have learned a lot of valuable lessons. Our collect it once and use it lots approach provides consistency and comparability, and it's highly cost effective. We use quite a tight specification and we rarely deviate from that. So that provides confidence in the quality of our data and the analysis that we then provide. We've also learned we've got to be flexible, and a regional approach is really necessary to accommodate changing needs and philosophies. We need to listen to our risk management authorities and their needs and respond accordingly. Because despite having our evidence base, local knowledge and a local understanding of their area and the way that it responds is key. We try to embrace new technologies as much as we can to allow us to streamline our capture regimes and make the most of the limited budgets that we have, again, where we can. There is a fine balance to be struck between being at the forefront of new technologies and making sure that we're not wasting money trialing technologies that don't work out for us. So we have to work on that balance. And especially in the Southwest, we've learned that our main blocker to data collection is our UK weather. So we fly our LiDAR during the winter months to minimise the impact of vegetation. And we're already limited by the available spring tidal windows. So cloud cover can be very problematic for data collection there. And similarly, we also fly aerial photography. We do that during the summer months for maximum vegetation cover, as that feeds into our habitat mapping. But increasingly, we are struggling with wetter summers, which may or may not be, is proving increasingly difficult. Again, we've also found that it is really important to work in partnership with your coastal managers, your coastal practitioners, and the coastal communities. We need to build strong relationships with them. They're the end user. And if we don't meet their management needs, then why are we monitoring in the first place? We periodically review our monitoring with them and our programme partners to ensure that it does remain relevant. But the most important thing we've learned throughout our almost 2 decades of coastal monitoring is that sustained monitoring and analysis is key. Our data set becomes more valuable as it matures. And when we're faced with the uncertainties of climate change and building resilience and adaptation into our communities, we're going to become more and more reliant on our evidence base. So this is probably something that throughout this whole series you're going to hear echoed, but good evidence is the cornerstone to effective management and policy making. So that is the end of my presentation. You can see my contact details are on the screen should anybody ever need to get in touch with us. But I'll happily take any more questions if anybody has any now.
Merci beaucoup, Emerald.
Thank you very much, Emerald, for this very clear presentation. We were traveling in the north, and we understand the different climate constraints, the ones you compared to the ones you have in the Indian Ocean. But you also have more or less the same question as with Romney. What is the status, the governance aspect of this observing system, Emerald?
So we are a partnership. So there are various layers. So we have a national board which oversees the national network, and then we have coordination groups where the networks come together to kind of provide insight and ideas and learn lessons from each other. On an individual project basis, we have a project board which oversees. We have a project team that is the next tier down, so that brings in our partners. So our key partners from the various agencies that we work with sit on the project team on an operational capacity to make sure that we're making the decisions and monitoring in the most relevant way. And then we have our delivery team sitting in the Coastal Observatory who then deliver the programme.
Et combien de personnes dans le delivery team?
How many people do you have in the delivery team of the observatory?
At present, there are 11 of us, and we administer the whole project. So from a contracts and finances all the way down to delivering the data and quality assuring the data.
Merci beaucoup. Avant de passer la parole à Victor, qui a aussi d'autres questions, notamment sur l'aspect participatif, moi, je voudrais vous poser une question sur...
Before giving the floor, there is a question on the risk. We see that your observatory is more focused on the risk-based approach. So I would like to understand whether you work or where you have funding from insurance companies or banking institutions, or how about that?
No, all of our funding it's central government grant in aid funding. It's administered via our Environment Agency, and that's given to us in kind of 6 yearly chunks, and we can then use that for our monitoring over that period. We don't work with external funders generally, especially not insurance providers. We do work with other kind of scientific projects, so we'll sit along academic research. We're part of other government-funded projects where we sit in a kind of an advisory or a data providing capacity, but we don't tend to work with external providers in that way. We try and be quite neutral, so we are very kind of ring-fenced so that we don't have any bias or any commitments outside of just coastal monitoring.
L'idée n'était pas tant de savoir si, à cause des financements...
The idea is to know whether you have any link and insurance themselves to ask the question, and whether it may have an impact on general change. So in terms of country planning, if insurance companies decide not to fund anymore, and if the bank stops to fund in such an area, it can totally change the territorial development. So that's what we want to understand.
So our risk-based approach, again, is available for insurers. The information is there. They could, in theory, go and access that and make decisions based on that. It's not something that we've had any feedback about since we started. That doesn't seem to be having an impact. It's something that we have considered, but it's not generally something that is on our radar at present.
Thank you very much. Victor, je sais que tu avais d'autres questions sur
Victor, I know you have other question on participatory science. Please go on. Yes, good morning, everyone. And we have a question on the community commitment. You were talking about Emerald in your presentation. So how does this community commitment is being concretized in terms of participatory science as well? Do you have any specific example to give us?
So we are part of another government-funded project that is called Making Space for Sand, and within that we've installed many of these CoastNap posts. It allows the community to kind of become engaged, take ownership of their sites, and basically they compile a photo database, various different photos. We will then knit them together and we create time lapses generally, which we make available to the community and via social media, and it's just a really good way of them understanding how the beach changes kind of from a daily scale all the way up to longer term. We haven't been doing this for that long, so the long-term data set isn't as prevalent there. Some of the sites have been in longer than others, but we do have a lot of photos, and it allows the communities to understand the changes based on just tides or storm events, etc. I'm not sure, does that answer the question?
Ok, merci. Est-ce que ces données récoltées
are these collected data are only for the whole purpose of awareness raising, or they are also used in a scientific project? And what is the how robust are these data?
So at the moment, they are largely used for community participation. It's part of the Global Citizen Science Initiative. So there are various institutions working on the what now. Now we have this information, what do we do with it? And how we can look at gaining information on shoreline change and actual quantitative data rather than just the imagery that works so well as a community engagement tool. So at the moment, what we're doing with it is community focused, but there are institutions out there. The University of New South Wales is where it originated, so they are leading the way on investigating what we can derive from that photography.
Merci pour ces réponses.
Thank you very much for this answer. We also have a question from Cyril, who is asking, with your experience on the 18 years of studies, could you please have some cycle with some indicators where is it too short, 18 years, to see those type of things appear as well?
I think it probably is slightly shorter than you would ideally want, but we can see that there are changes on a site-by-site basis. It's whether you attribute them to local changes or whether you attribute them to kind of a global scale climate change. That's where the uncertainty comes in. We are subject to the NAO oscillations, etc. So yeah, making concerted decisions is quite difficult with such a short timeline. 20 years is not huge in the greater scheme of things. But the longer we monitor, the more we'll be able to see these changes and the more we will be gaining in certainty.
Merci beaucoup, Emerald.
Thank you very much, Emerald. Maybe another more question. We could see from other observatory that there is a whole ecosystem on this observatory that can include information, communication, etc., but also some technical support and the local technicians. Or so, do you in your observatory, is it something that you also implement, exist in the collect and analysis of the data?
Yes, we have a very large coastline, so we do use contractors to collect a lot of our data, but we as a team do know our region and we do go out and collect largely just the topographic data ourselves. So we have that knowledge and our specialist knowledge of those sites. We do work really closely with our partners. We're based in the University of Plymouth as well, so that we can integrate with their research groups, so that we're always keeping up our own scientific knowledge and keeping at the forefront of developments that way. But we do partner up with local authorities and coastal managers and practitioners to kind of build on what we've achieved from a monitoring perspective and put that into practice in real life.
Merci beaucoup. On va proposer à
thank you very much. Let's try invite Rema to join us for the last round of questions. No, unfortunately,
all the participants around the table. Dans les questions qui reviennent régulièrement.
So the questions that comes recurrently on the observatory, we have this key question on what are the main problems, challenges you've been faced, and where you have solved easily. So this is always a recurrent problem. So it's we open the floor to both of you, and maybe let's start with Remy to answer this question, and then to Emerald, how you addressed the different encountered problems. I don't know whether we have solved them, but the main difficulties we have encountered is to, to break all of those prejudice ideas on coastal dynamics. So for me, it's a rather permanent difficulty. We need to insist, and that's why we are conducting some awareness raising and training workshops as well, to avoid those prejudices and concepts that are now more coherent with what is observed across the world. Thank you very much. Emerald, the floor is yours. Same question. So for you, what are the recurrent problems you have encountered and how did you address them?
I think similarly to Remy, it's the why are we doing this? We've collected data, so you've got some data now. What do you need to do? go away and do something with it rather than keep collecting it. So it's the sustained need for monitoring and the sustained need to put the funding forward to complete that monitoring, which is the most challenging aspect for us, I think. But as we're a national network, we are lucky enough that we have that support around us and that justification from around the UK, which kind of backs up the need for that monitoring.
Et aujourd'hui, est-ce qu'il existe des réseaux d'échange entre observatoires à l'échelle nationale? Je crois que on en avait parlé la semaine dernière, ça existe.
So are there a network for data exchange at the national level in the UK and also a global scale data exchange network as well for you to address the problems as well?
Rémi?
So in the UK, we do have that national network, and we do spend a lot of time discussing things together as a network. Globally, it's not something that we really participate in hugely, to be honest. We definitely welcome the opportunity to sit down and share our experiences and learn from others.
Rémi, pour
Mondial.
compléter.
Remy, please. It's the same as well. There is a national network. There is a committee who meets to exchange and share the experience feedback from the different territories on which the observatory are working. But there is no such exchange at the international level other than through the scientific community. One last question, and then I will ask all of you to go to conclude. So for today, do we see a speeding up in terms of consciousness of decision making, the policy makers on the most visible impact of flooding, of erosion? So is the awareness increase or and what's the role of the observatory to provide reliable data to be able to make appropriate decision? Emerald, the floor is yours.
I think we are getting to the point now where there's definitely more awareness and a more of an urgency. Certainly different conferences, etc., where the practitioners all come together. The talk is of acceleration and climate change. So the need is there. It's just how that translates through, because obviously as practitioners and managers, we understand the needs, but filtering that through up into central government in order to obtain the funding and the backing for schemes and strategies to address that, I think that's where the stumbling blocks for us are lying.
Merci beaucoup. Rémi, de ton côté.
Alors, il y a une prise de conscience. Après, je pense que
In
ça
fact, there is an awareness raising. In fact, for the exposure on this phenomenon in La Réunion, there are local strategies being implemented. So we see very well that territory actors try to organize themselves to take into account this problem and implement coastal erosion management strategy. But it is still up to the territory now to address this issue.
Merci beaucoup de vos
Thank you
interventions.
very much for your different interventions. So I will like to, unfortunately for Noordin, I would like to apologize for him not being able to join us for this webinar to present the Comoros case. But if you have any final words, anything you would like to say to the people who would like to set up and facilitate also a coastal observatory. So any final words, advice, Emerald?
I would just say that reach out to those who are already doing it and learn from lived experiences. We can all support each other and come together, and that's, I think, collaboration is the way that we should be achieving this.
Merci beaucoup. Rémi, pareil.
Thank you very much. Rémi, same word. I do agree with what Rod was saying. I think that the territory actors need to work together and collaborate on this problematic. It's not only about the physical aspect with different aspects, ecosystems, everything that is happening on the watersheds, our upstream or downstream. So we need to have this overall reflection to control these problems, especially on the climate change impacts. So thank you very much, both of you, and our sincere apologies for Nordin not to be able to join us. And thank you very much. We would like to conclude this second session of a series of webinars. And the next one will be on the 20th of June on biodiversity and coastal economics, and the last one on coastal socioeconomic dynamics. Thank you very much, and see you next time.